Welcome back. In our last video, we looked at basic inking, which is basically working with our pencils, creating a new layer, and then using our ink brush to create the outlines and the basic structure of this fire hydrant. In this video, we're going to add some lighting information. We're going to establish a light source, and we're going to then proceed to ink. Before we do that, though, one of the things that I like to do is I like to merge all my inks layers together so you can see that I've got my inks on separate layers. I'll just hold down the Shift key on the bottommost ink layer and I'll hit Command E. And I'll just double click and I'll call this inks. So now I've got my ink layer. Once I've done this, I can always toggle off the pencils layer, which in this case is layer 1. So now I can see exactly what I want to see. Now before I go ahead and start shading, one thing I want to note is that when you're looking at your inks layer, I think it's important, especially when you're starting out, to try to close these gaps. It'll make the coloring process, which we'll talk about in this course, much easier in the beginning. Now you don't have to do this, but it is a time-saving tool, and you can always, if you like an open gap inking style, you can always come back and you can remove that. And the other thing that I like to do too is just I like to clean up with the lasso tool and make some cuts by hitting Command or Control X just to clean up my inks. So there's like a little bit of overlap. This does happen, it's not a big deal. Just gives the inks a cleaner look, like up here. Boom. So now we've got something that looks relatively clean. I'll make a new layer just where I can show my shading, because if I want to change my shading or if I'm not happy with it or for whatever reason, I don't have to go right back to the beginning and re-ink. So it's always about working smart and not hard. So I'm going to establish my shading. In order to do that, I'm going to assume for this example that I have a light source that is coming from the top right. So I'll just put a little sun here just so that we know that there is a light source that's far away. It is going to hit this hydrant, and the side facing the sun will obviously be illuminated, and the side that is not facing the sun will be ensconced in darkness. So what we can do now is, and since I've got the sun on this layer, I'll just make a new layer here. I'll just make a line that kind of indicates where the shading would start. And I'm also keeping in mind that like this little ring that goes around the hydrant right here is rounded. So I'm indicating that as a rounded form. I'll just zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. This is round. We're not drawing any straight lines because we're dealing with rounded and curved surfaces. Now, when I get to this point right here, yes, I do have a straight line. The part of this hydrant that will be visible from the sun is going to be the top part right here, so it'll be another straight line, like so. I'll do it for the opposite side. You can hold down the Shift key, come down over here, and this is just indicating, just make it out a little bit, there we go. This will just give us a better idea of, where the highlights are. The highlights are all going to be on the right-hand side and the top of these points, and also in this side. And as we start moving through this fire hydrant and going to the darkest areas, obviously the part that is not visible to the sun, and I'll just go ahead and indicate another mark here, this will be an area that is going to be dark. It'll be fully black. And same thing over here, I guess from this point on down, it's going to be black. So what are we going to do? Let's first add our black fills. Our black fills are those darkest areas within our composition. So we've already established that everything on this side is going to be dark. So what I can do next is I can use my paint bucket tool, and you might see the gradient here, but pull out the paint bucket tool. We're going to use the paint bucket tool, and we're just simply going to apply the paint bucket tool as follows. And when you're doing that, you want to double check and make sure that you have anti-alias, contiguous, and all layers checked off. These need to be, or checked on rather. They need to be toggled on so that you can ink on the layer that you're drawing with. And now I'm going to fill this in. You can see right away what this does is it creates a dramatic amount of contrast and gives our fire hydrant some extra dimension. So these are the darkest areas. Now, is this scientifically accurate? No, it's not. I'll be the first to admit it, but it's something that is going to be believable. And again, these are just adding the darkest components, and we're going to start talking about how do you imply values that are between white and black. That's what we're going to do next. But we just added our black fills for this video. We've established where the shading will start, and we've got now something that has some dimension and some form. So in the next video, we'll look at adding some shading that will make this fire hydrant even more dimensional. So I'll see you then.